Everybody, Invisiblekatana here with my review for The Batman. That's a reference to the animated series The Batman with the same title. Also, as you can see, I'm wearing a crazy shirt. Ignore that. Ignore all the Evil Dead stuff that I got. This is also a 420 review. Spoilers will be in the second half. This is super late. I didn't feel like doing it Friday. And then Saturday I was just busy and I was kind of just like, I also don't want to do it today. And then Sunday I just had a headache and I also just completely forgot and was like, Batman, it's fine. It's not Star Wars. I'm in no rush. So, The Batman, starring Robert Pattinson of Twilight fame, of course. He was great in Tenet. He's great in pretty much everything. I've only ever seen Twilight and Tenet, so for me, I was like, I think he's fine. I was never worried about it. And he did a good job. It was decent. The movie as a whole is decent. It's not my favorite, of course. I mean, for some people it is. It's not mine. I still enjoy The Dark Knight, and I think that mostly comes down to The Dark Knight's just more exciting. Excuse me. Both movies are long. This one's, I think, closer to 3 hours than The Dark Knight was. I think that was like a 2:45. This was basically like 2:56, 50, that sort of deal. Excuse me. It was fun for sure. Like I just don't really see myself seeing it again. Like it's not. I mean, it's been a long time since I saw a movie where I was like, man, I really got to go see that a second time. I wanted to see Spider-Man, but kids, what can you do? So saw it once, great. But yeah, this wasn't one where I was like, oh man, I'd really like to see that a second time. It was just like, that was nice. I'll watch some of the action scenes, in 4K on YouTube at some point, and then I'm pretty much good. I'm excited for the sequel. I think it was definitely a great movie. Setting up the way that they have it paced, I'm definitely excited. I think this was much like, honestly, I feel like this is pretty much exactly the same vein as the last trilogy we had, of course. So Batman Begins, nobody seemed to really care much. Batman Begins was like, yeah, that was a cool Batman movie. I remember I saw it and I was just like, yeah, it was cool. But it was kind of like this. I was like, yeah, it's cool. Yeah, it was Batman. He was, it took a minute for him to be Batman in the movie. And it was interesting. I don't think I really understood that was Ra's al Ghul when I was younger. I think I was just like, I don't understand. Maybe I did, and I just don't remember knowing that was him. I just remember kind of being confused at some point. But it didn't have the fanfare. Dark Knight comes out, blew the lid off the place. So maybe that's what we got for the sequel. Maybe they'll shorten it down a little, make it a bit more exciting. Who knows, what the next villain is going to be and stuff like that. I think it definitely has great potential as far as the sequel is concerned. This movie is good, but like I said, I'm not going to really go back to see it. Despite it being so long, I feel like there's not much I can really reference outside of the actors did well, and this is like super dark. It's not like, there's some campy, I shouldn't say campy, there's some lighthearted elements, but for the most part, this one's just really dark and grim, and Bruce is just like, it's definitely young Bruce, which is another huge reason I'm excited for what they could do in the future, because this is him really early on, and so it's like, it's not really spoilers, but it's just him early on. So he's not the same person where it's like, oh, he does fake Bruce stuff. He doesn't do that in this movie. He's just like, parents died, I'm sad, I'm Batman. And that's it. That's like the whole movie. So he's not like the playboy philanthropist who's like, oh, I'm dating all these different women. He just hates everybody and everything. So he has to grow into becoming that character and utilizing the side he doesn't actually care about, because that's, the big thing about Batman is he is Batman. He's not Bruce Wayne. Like, that's like his whole deal. They even have it way back in Batman Beyond. They had that, and Bruce is like, when I think maybe it was Injustice. It was some crossover, I think, and somebody was like pretending to be in his head or like another version of him, and he knocked him out or whatever. And he was like, I knew because he called me Bruce, and in my head when I talk to myself, I don't call myself Bruce. So I was like, that's super cool. He's Batman. That's the whole thing. So they touch on that, which I thought was fun. He has some decent action. Riddler is entertaining, at least as a villain, and like the riddles and the way it's paced out. Also, this is I think where the contention comes in, because I've seen a lot of people love it, a lot of people kind of hate it. I like it simply due to the fact that it's early Batman, but they get into some stuff where it's like, oh, he's too young to be the world's greatest detective just yet. So I enjoyed it personally. And I'll get to some of the spoilers with that, but all in all, I thought it was a decent movie. I think you should at least see it once. It's definitely long for me personally. I didn't feel it too much. I think maybe like towards the end I started to, because of how the story was going, and then it was like, oh, like there's a big chunk after, and it was just like, okay, just the way it kind of dipped. It wasn't a problem. It was just how I noticed it. But then it picked right back up, and it's just like, okay, it's like a split second where it's like, okay, I'm, I hadn't felt how long the movie was, and then I was like, it feels like there's a lot more to come. So where are we at? So I guess technically, just because the story went into like that dip and then came back out, is what made me think of it. But all in all, I didn't really mind it. I think I would though, knowing every single thing that's gonna happen next. I would definitely mind it within 3 hours. Seeing it for the first time, I can like fall into a movie and I'm good. At least if I'm enjoying it, and I did enjoy it. But I could definitely see myself like, all right, I know exactly what's coming next, and there's nothing in this where I'm really like, holy crap, I gotta see that scene again. Once again, it would probably be just the action sequences. But it's like, I gotta see that moment. It's like I'm fine just wait. Like the moments that I would want to see, they're short enough to just be like, yeah, I'm fine. It's not that big of a deal. Went longer than I thought I could on non-spoilers, but all in all, check out the movie. Officially getting into spoilers, so if you don't want to be spoiled, here's your official warning. Spoilers. I like the movie. I like that they did the long Halloween. That's why Falcone was Catwoman's father. Forgot that was one. So that's where that comes from. I highly recommend the long Halloween, the animated or the book, the comic or the animated movies, because they actually did a part 1 and part 2. So it's one of the DC animated movies where they actually got to flesh out the story a decent amount, and I really enjoyed it. I know there were technically some twists in there. I didn't really know, but it was interesting the way they did it, because what I guessed was not the most unique guess in the world. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then turns out I was kind of onto something, and then they decided to change things, and I thought they did a good job with it. I was definitely enjoying it. The acting is great and all that good stuff. Animation is phenomenal. I always love the animation in the DC animated movies. Highly recommend them. If you haven't seen any of them, you're missing out on some of the best DC stuff there is. Honestly, it's those animated movies. Those should be in the theaters. I know it'd be hard for them to pull it off just to be like, let's just show this in theaters. But some of those, without a doubt, need to be in theaters. Like Dark Side Apocalypse War, that was insane. That was absolutely phenomenal. That could have been in theaters. We had the Killing Joke, and we saw how that went. That it went the way it went. But I'm like, man, Flashpoint could have been in theaters. Flashpoint is so good. If you haven't seen Flashpoint, Flashpoint is great. There's Superman Shazam fight Black Adam. Absolutely amazing, because it's like, this is super cool. All the DC animated stuff you should be watching. You should be 100% caught up. They're literally on the third universe in the animated comics, or animated movies, sorry. So there you go. I hope that convinced somebody, because those things are really worth it. And I still feel like they don't get enough credit, because I'm like, there's so much better. You don't have to wait for live action. I promise you, it's in one of the animated movies. But full on spoilers once again. Them making her Falcone's daughter, I thought was interesting. I was like, okay, cool, long Halloween. I know there's been some other references here and there. It even starts like right before Halloween, and I was like, oh, this really is like the long Halloween. But it doesn't. It can't. I didn't expect it to do the actual story of long Halloween, where it takes such a long time. But I was like, oh, that'll be interesting. I thought what they were going to do was actually end it on Halloween, and then they kind of blow past it. And I was like, oh, that kind of sucks, because I thought that's where they were headed, where it was going to be like this intense thing within like a day, and then boom, like right on Halloween is kind of how things would play out. Because if I'm not mistaken, it was only like 2 days before or something like that. I think it was like the 29th or something, and so that's why I thought it was gonna be like, oh, this is really interesting, or maybe it was on Halloween night or something like that. But I was like, oh, this is an interesting way to take it, and it was good. I like the way it was handled. Ultimately, I was fine. Like I said, I didn't mind the fact that they didn't have all the solutions to all the problems, where it was like, oh, they went from like a rat with wings, it could be a pigeon, like, oh, a stool pigeon, well, it could be a bat, it could be you, oh, a falcon too, and Falcone, like, oh, all this stuff. I was fine with it. I was okay that they stumbled through it simply because it was year 2. If it was year 12, I'd be like, oh, what's wrong with him? Why is he stupid? So it's it's fine. He doesn't understand everything. He doesn't. The riddles weren't like insanely intense either. I think the very first one, I was super close, because as soon as it said it's like, what does a liar do when they die, I was like, they lie still. That was the first thing I thought, was they lie still, and it was they sit still. I was like, oh, okay, I wasn't that far off, but it's not like it was, holy crap, what's gonna happen? It just kept going, and then it was like, oh, a stool pigeon, and I'm pretty sure the bat thing came after the stool pigeon, and I was like, I remember that's why that stuck in my head. So if I got that backwards, please let me know. But I could have sworn the bat thing came after the pigeon thing, and I was like, guys, you kind of figured out like a couple of steps already. Like he was definitely talking about the pigeon stuff, because I'm pretty sure the pigeon thing came after. But I could be totally wrong, and it just makes sense. Like, well, what if it was a bat, but it was a pigeon? I don't remember. So if it's backwards, definitely let me know. But I could have sworn when I saw the movie, it was like they did the bat thing second as they were going through, and I was like, that doesn't really make sense. Because the first thing I think that's why I remember it, because I thought for sure the first thing they would do was say bat, and that wasn't their very first guess. They said something else, and I was like, oh, I thought it would have been like the obvious thing to just go with a bat first. So maybe I really remembered that wrong, but I'm pretty sure they say bat second, and I'm like, okay, that's interesting. But I thought that was after they got the information. But either way, they stumble through and ultimately end up succeeding, and I was fine with it. I thought, like I said, them going through year 2, if I'm not mistaken. So it's year 2 of Batman. He doesn't know everything that he's doing. He just got his car in this one during a very two dumb scenes real close together, and unfortunately they involved that car. I love the car, absolutely amazing, over the top sound effects and everything for the engine. But why did that scene last so long? Like, he was revving it up, which also, it's a Batman thing. I've only heard one other person bring this up, and I totally thought it when I saw the movie. During that sequence where they're being shot at and they are completely held down, I thought for sure something else was going to happen. And then before they actually show the car, they show that Selina looks and it's like, oh, Bruce is gone. And I'm like, the whole point of him ducking was that there was no way out of this. They had like every single person coming and shooting at them. And it was like their attention was barely split. When Gordon came in and started shooting at them, I'm like, there was still like more, like half a dozen people, a little bit more than half a dozen. They weren't all suddenly like, oh man, let's look over here. Like, they were still looking at the car. And I'm like, how could he have possibly gotten over there in that short amount of time? Of course, it's a Batman thing, but it seemed like they made a point to be like, he is trapped here just like she is. And then he pulled like the disappearing act. And I was like, this is like the one time it just felt weird. And I was like, that just doesn't make sense though. Like, they were literally pinned down. Like, Batman has gotten out of those situations, and that's what I was expecting. And then they pulled the bat vanish, and I'm like, that just doesn't fit in this situation. It's like the one time I think that's ever not worked for me where I'm like, they are pinned down. This isn't like he kind of moved really fast around them or something. It was like they were pinned down. The car was literally like around the corner, off to the side. Like, he would have had to do like a giant curve all the way around to get to the car, and I guess he did. So that was weird in itself. And then the super long car scene where he's revving it up forever, and then car chase, super cool. Definitely killed some people, but it's fine. We've seen it before. Batman definitely kills in the movies. That's just how it goes. But he gets to the end. They do that big scene where he's walking upside down from like the very first official trailer and stuff. And Penguin's looking and he's walking. And once again, why did this scene go for so long? He's walking and it's menacing and stuff. It's cool. Why did they film him getting to the car and like slowly looking over? Like, it looked like he was straining when I was watching. I'm like, he looks like he's straining because his adrenaline is pumping and the blood is just like blowing into his brain as he leans over. Like, it looked like he was straining. Like, and I'm like, why did they show this? I didn't need to see him walk all the way to the car, stand there. I felt like he stood there for an eternity before actually leaning over. But I guess he was just doing it really slow, like Batman. And I'm like, what is this scene for? It was cool until he got to the car, and then he slowly bends upside. Like, that's not epic anymore. Like, I can't see the bottom of Batman's ankles and then see him like bent over at the same time. I'm like, no, like, that's not menacing. That's really funny to me. Like, he's about to do yoga, and he looked like he was straining because of all the rubber in the suit. So I was just like, this is dumb. It's lasting way too long. And then eventually they cut to Penguin being tied up, which is where we get he was doing like the Penguin waddle. I was like, oh, that's a great reference. But yeah, that scene, I was like, just the end caps. The start of the car was way too long. The end of him walking was way too long. Those are like the two moments where I'm just like, way too much. But he has a cool fight sequence. He has a cool car sequence. Him being shot up, the scene we saw in the trailer once again was really good. The opening sequence was really crazy, and he just beat the crap out of them. I was hoping we'd see more of that. Oddly enough, we didn't. Like, he wasn't as brutal as we thought he was going to be. Like, from like that first trailer where they used the opening fight scene, and he beats the crap out of that guy. And that was the scene where everybody's like, oh man, like, there's all the jokes about the Arkham games where it's like, Batman doesn't kill, and the model is, they ragdoll and they're all bent over. But this was like, oh, he's definitely that. But he's only that in the very beginning. Fantastic opening where, people just look into the shadows and they're doing the narration. I was like, this is like the best. I think it's probably my favorite opening to a Batman movie, because I was like, this feels, this is like some deep Batman stuff that they don't ever really show. They're definitely not in live action, but I thought that was really cool. Like, someone drops something into a shadow, just like, is Batman there? they saw the symbol and they instantly think they're the one that's about to get hit. I was like, that's great. That literally, that showed the fear that Batman likes to give, to the criminals of Gotham to stop them just in case he might be there. Because I know what Batman can do. And that was really cool. It's a fantastic opening. And then he beat the crap out of those guys. And then every other fight was just like, yeah, it seemed like an okay punch. I felt like they should have had more moments of maybe him fighting. Maybe fight less people with guns. Like everybody had a gun, which totally makes sense. They're all they're criminals. It's actually smarter for them. But I was like, man, I feel like there would have been a great opportunity to have him do more hand to hand stuff like in the beginning, because that was probably aside from him doing like the hallway shot. That was probably my favorite action sequence in the movie, not counting that, and also I guess the car chase, if you want to count that specifically as an action sequence, which, considering all the people that died, I guess we should. But that opening shot where he beats the crap out of the guy, he chases the one dude up against the support beam and stuff, I was like, this is really cool. And then I didn't feel like he was really that dark at any other point, and I guess it was mostly because people were like shooting at him or throwing stuff at him, so a lot of stuff was him taking down someone like over here, and then he has to like block as he makes his way to the next person. It's kind of like a video game almost, because I feel like they did that a lot in some of the action, where it was like, okay, he has to get these two, this person, that person way over there, and he has to kind of flow between them a lot like the Arkham games. But I wanted more kind of up close stuff where it's like he's just rough and like hurting people really like extra bad. It looks like he's definitely killing them with his hands. That's kind of what I wanted to see, because it's an early version. He needs to figure out how to pull more punches and whatnot. So that's what I was hoping for, and I felt like we still didn't actually end up getting that. It wasn't as dark, like him as Batman wasn't as brutal as I thought. I guess it was still dark because he was just dark, but even the way he acted was still very Batman. Like he was just slower about it because he was new Batman, but he wasn't like dark with the criminals. He was like normal. The closest we got, like I said, was the opening, and I guess him yelling at the Riddler, but not as much as I would have liked, but it was still good. Like I said, action was decent. All the actors are good. I was fine with Catwoman. I'm in the camp of her mask look dumb. It makes sense for her not to have like the full thing, but maybe they should have gone with like the goggles look or something, or just a hood. I don't know. But I was like, for me, I was like, great actress, great role, but that mask was just like, it was just weird. It was just like supposed to be a different type of mask, and clearly they just cut it so her mouth was showing. And I was like, I guess, but it didn't look right. But the character was great. I thought she had a good storyline. Looking for a friend, and then the whole process of getting revenge on her father, who we do find out actually did strangle her mother as well. Excited to see what they do with her next. I feel like they'll leave her out of the second movie and then bring her back in the third. I think that would be really interesting, just so they can have more time to build up newer characters. So I'd prefer that. But we're also getting a Penguin show. Now that I think about it, Penguin is getting his own show. So I guess they wouldn't really have to build him up in the movie. He could just be kind of like how we see him if he's introduced in most stuff. He's just established. That's typically how you see most villains. They're already at the top. Or at least super close. So for most people, it wouldn't matter anyway. But he does get built up. So even if she came back in the sequel, I guess she could still have space if they only added one extra villain, but I still prefer to see them add like two new characters that can actually stick around and kind of leave her out and bring her back in the third movie. And it's hard to say because of course movies have to be so contained. They probably wouldn't bother risking that because the whole sequels and stuff. It's easier to do that in a show than it is in a movie where they're like, let's plan out like the next 10 years of Batman. They might do that in terms of reboots, but maybe not in a set series. So they might not have that, kind of coming down the pipeline, but I would love it personally if she was out of the second movie, just so we could get even more characters, because I think they did a great job with these. It would be cool. It would be cool to see, more of the superpowered villains. I would love to, how do you do Freeze? How do you do Clayface? Nobody can. Speaking of the Batman and Clayface, if you have not seen the Batman animated series, aside from the fact that it has the greatest Batmobile, which is the second version in that cartoon, it's so good. They have the greatest version of Clayface ever. So, at the very least, just watch all those episodes, but you should watch the whole show in general. They do some cool stuff. It actually got like 4 or 5 seasons. I think it's all on Netflix, probably on HBO Max at this point, but you should watch The Batman. It's amazing. It's so amazing. Really great animation too. But yeah, even if they did Clayface in the movies, probably wouldn't be as good as the show, but they could still do Clayface. That would be sick. Firefly, once again, the Batman made Firefly cool for me personally. That's actually my favorite version of Firefly. So, that show did some good stuff. Crazy stuff too, but some good stuff. Watch Dracula versus Batman. Crazy movie, but I loved it. It's a vampire Joker. It's actually pretty cool. Highly recommend all that stuff. DC animated in general is typically pretty good, but I'm probably in this year. I know I skipped. I didn't even talk about a bunch of other stuff. The Joker. I wish he wasn't there at the end, not just because of how he looked, but I was like, oh, it's the Joker, sure, but can't we just do other people once again? Maybe leave him in Arkham. That would be cool. He could be they could do a Long Halloween sort of deal, which they technically filmed. Once again, another thing from Long Halloween. They did that in that movie, or technically, I think he went to Calendar Man in the Long Halloween actually. So it would be that sort of thing. But he could go. They filmed a scene where he goes to Joker to try to figure out like who is the Riddler. Like help me try to figure out what they might do next. So Joker's technically already established. They could keep him in there, and we're good. And they build up other villains and maybe bring him out down the line and have him like, cause a breakout. Sure. But leave him in there because we don't, just not yet. Like, let somebody else get an effing chance. Save Mr. Freeze or something. We'll see how that turns out. So that would be hilarious if they did Freeze next, which I would love to see. I would love to see a good. I mean, Gotham, I think, did a good job. I know a lot of people were like, meh, on Gotham. I think they did a really good job with some of the villains in that too. Characters in general, Penguin and Riddler in that are so good. They're probably some of my favorite versions. Gotham's actually pretty good. I know how that went, but I like Gotham. I thought it was fun. So, all in all, I enjoyed the movie. I saw it once. I'm good. I'll check out the action sequences later. I hope we pretty much leave everyone in this movie except for Gordon, who will, of course, be commissioner. Everybody else, they can leave out of the sequel. They won't for Penguin, I'm sure, because he's such a staple, unless he's in prison. They could do what they do in this. Maybe they'll build him up as a main villain. So that'll be interesting, especially with the show coming up. How far will he get in his series, which will be on HBO Max, of course. So depending on how far he gets there, who knows what they'll do with him in the sequel. He could be the big bad, or he could just be a secondary villain again. Who knows? There's a lot of potential there. I'm actually very excited for what they can do for a sequel. I think they have a great kind of start for this new Bat universe and whatever they're doing multiverse wise. I think Keaton's getting his own show too, if I'm not mistaken, or he's supposed to show up in Batgirl. They're doing a bunch of weird stuff, but as long as it's good, who cares, honestly. But this being its own universe, whether it eventually crosses over, if they do Crisis on Infinite Earths, all that good stuff, we'll see. But as of now, it's a good start. I'm definitely excited to see the second one and feel the same way about that as I do The Dark Knight. That's my hope. Just a bit more exciting. Maybe just shorten it. Have definitely grander action sequences. I feel this one, not like nothing felt bombastic and crazy. The events it did, but even the final fight to me wasn't like holy crap. It was an interesting aesthetic for sure, and he fought a bunch of people, but I still didn't feel like that holy crap moment. Action wise from Batman, and I would love to really see that. I feel like that's what's been missing. Live action wise, I want to see like just a cool fight moment from Batman. And I feel like we don't have that. We have some great stuff. Dark Knight, this does some good early detective, year 1, year 2 type stuff. But I think the sequel's definitely going to be like, okay, this is really, it might not be Dark Knight, sure, but just the start of this, I'm like, I feel like it could get really close, if not be better. It just depends on how it's done. But I'm like, I think it always has potential. And then you get The Dark Knight Rises. I like it, but I know how people feel about it. That's how it is. Either way, thanks for checking this out. I know this got super rambly at the end here with all the DC stuff. It's been a minute, I feel, since we've had something DC based, and I've been catching up on a lot of the DC animated movies, honestly. So I've kind of been in a bit of a DC swarm as of late because I've been catching up on the animated stuff and watching this, and I've been watching a bunch of other Batman things in hype and Justice League, like DCAU full timeline stuff. Check out Jay's reviews. So I've been kind of swirling the drain on all things DC, so everything kind of is getting let out right now because I've been catching up on a lot of DC stuff and being like, yeah, I like it over here. It don't have Spider-Man, but it's pretty cool on this side too. It's cool, and Batman's awesome. He's fun. Super Pets is coming up next. That trailer actually looked kind of funny. I'm gonna have to check that out if it's actually good. We'll see. But as of now, thanks for checking this out. We'd love to know your thoughts on The Batman and where you think it could go. What villains do you guys want to see? Maybe what heroes do you guys want to see? If they decide to do their own mini-universe, who would you want to see pop up in this seemingly super realistic version of the Batman universe. Also, Gotham looked like crap in this, and I was like, wow, that's Gotham. They did it. That was another first. I felt like all the other ones, oh yeah, it's Gotham. Especially Batman and Robin just made it look crazy. But this was like, oh, this place is a shithole. Like any other time you see it, it's like, yeah, Gotham's bad and there's bad guys, bad. And this is like, oh, it just sucks. Like, this is horrible. I don't want to be here. I don't want you to be here. Leave. Go leave. Just please leave. So they definitely did Gotham right in this because I was like, I hate this place. This sucks. But once again, thanks for checking this out. Any comments, please put them down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.